Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Tracing Psychological Safety video series. This week, we're here to talk about the absolute essentials that you need to have in place if you're going to be serious about making progress and improvement within your teams on team culture dynamics, most importantly, psychological safety, whether you're buying software or whether you're just doing that in-house. So absolutely, first and foremost, the first thing we need to do is build awareness and understanding of what's really important to teams, what makes a high performing team, what makes a team truly productive. That is psychological safety. There are other elements to high performing teams, but psychological safety is the absolute cornerstone of a productive team. So building awareness and understanding is step one, but what do you do next? What do you do to really move that team forward and make it fly? And that's going to be the best thing you can do, in our opinion, is to put some kind of software in place in order to get that speed and scale to that activity. If you don't buy software, and if you do, we're here. We would recommend psychological safety software. If you don't, you can do this internally. But there are three or so key things that absolutely need to be in place in order for that work on your team to be successful.
Exactly. And in yesterday's article, we touched on a number of them. You can find a rather extensive list of things that should be in place, we think. But if you don't do all of them, then at least at the minimum, you have to, number one, focus on measuring. You have to do a number of things when it comes to measuring, if we're honest. Short of recreating an algorithm, which we realize is not feasible for everyone. Not everyone is a make psychological safety shop like we are. And while you do need it, because there are absolute ways in which you can combine information that will give you a lot more insights than we can even begin to tell you right now, you can probably do a lot without an algorithm, on the condition that you still do the first steps of creating one, which start with being able to decompose, if you wish, psychological safety into the components of it. Meaning, if you keep psychological safety as this one black box that you are not popping the hood of, and it's just a thing that makes high performance, you're not likely to be able to measure it. So what you need to do is make sure that you have deconstructed into the parts that are indeed the behaviors that you can observe in a psychologically safe and well-behaving team. And, we have a model we propose. It's not a secret one. You can see it anywhere that you see a screenshot of the components we measure. So feel free to think of the same components in the same ways. We check whether a team is flexible, if they are resilient, if they're learning together, if they're courageous, if they're open, if they speak up. And we also check if they're engaged, and we'll come back to this in a moment. But we also check negative behaviors, which are around impression management. So find those definitions in our software or elsewhere, and then kind of map what you believe are relevant questions towards those definitions and others. If you find other particular components that you see as good behaviors in your psychologically safe teams, use those. Obviously, we're not in any ways religious about just map this particular things. Map any kind of behavior on the condition that you name it, on the condition that you're very forensic about mapping questions and behaviors to those particular names, and on the condition that you bring your entire team along on the journey of deciding what those names are and what those categories are. So when it comes to measurement, make sure that you have this separation between concepts. The more you leave psychological safety as a black box, the less likely you are to be able to measure anything in a worthwhile way that leads you to the behaviors that you need to close the loop and see improvement that the team has arrived at themselves. Lastly, on the topic of measurement, make sure that you get enough buy-in from the team, because people are used to being measured for punitive reasons. They're used to being measured and bad things happen. You have to bring your team along so they understand it's a safe space for these measurements. And it is a place where they can bring their ideas. They can together look at the data. They can create this data and use this data. And then they can go ahead and see improvement in that way.
Absolutely. And
a little bit over Fion's bit, but they are not as clearly disconnected as that, unfortunately.
and leading on from that, once you've that data, so whether you're looking at it from a team software point of view, a psychological software point of view, working with us, working with another software provider, or if you're doing this work at the just internally or with the team itself, human to human, the really important thing is that safety, that psychological safety, is created at the team bubble level. So we say keep team software at the team bubble level, and we're a bit religious about this, but it's for good reason. You know, psychological safety, trust in teams is all about being able to speak up and be vulnerable and create environments and do actions together that keep that cycle going and that keep you feeling safe together and building towards greater productivity and innovation. And if you don't keep it at the bubble level, if it becomes a kind of organizational tool or an organizational piece of work where it's all about reporting metrics upwards to the top team, where it's all about somebody sitting in a board meeting saying, I'd really like that number, please, I'd like to know what's happening in that team, please, the trust isn't going to be there. The intention isn't going to be there, because the intent becomes something very, very different when you look at it from an organizational point of view than when you look at it at a team point of view. And as you know, if you watch us or read us, in our opinion, organizational culture is created at the team level, not by the organization. So if you're working on teams and psychological safety, keep it tight, keep it in the vault at the team level, because that's when you'll really, really create that safety and be able to power that team and every other team forwards in the organization.
Yes, very true. The bubble level is critical, we think. Another thing that we say, which is slightly controversial, and we assume that controversy, it's fine, someone needs to say it. The emperor is slightly naked when it comes to one of the notions we hear a lot about when it comes to human resources, and that notion is engagement. We hear about it, we see it in surveys, people ask about that number. It's one of the few things that have survived the last 20 years of discussing human resources improvement. And it's one of the I think, major, or I'd hope we agree, major pillars of human debt. It's because we have left engagement unchecked. Really, we're not looking at it from a conceptual point of view. We're not questioning what goes into that. We simply have this number on whether or not our employees are engaged, and X% more engaged than they were before. 99.9% of the time, it's a box-ticking exercise, and it involves the notion of whether or not, and it's a really simplistic way of putting it, but absolutely true, whether or not an individual would recommend this as a place of work. I mean, that is at best some type of survey at the end of a Deliveroo experience. It is not the definition of engagement. The definition of engagement, if you take a step back, should be a lot more around morale, should be a lot more around a connection of an emotional nature, should be a lot more around the bonding that the team has, and whether or not people are having personal relationships that are harmonious between them, whether they're empathic to each other, whether they know each other well. All of that stuff is how engaged they are with each other. Whether or not they're going to recommend the company as a place of work is so far from being a measurement that will give you any indication on whether or not they trust each other that I can't even begin to say. So the reason we're picking this particular point out of the other 5 or 6 is because if you start questioning what engagement really means, then you can start questioning what all the other ones really mean, and truly give a definition that means something to you, to flexibility, to learning, to all of the other elements that go in the idea of creating trust and well-oiled machines together in a team. So you're going to have a much better chance at naming those behaviors and deconstructing psychological safety into the elements that you can and should be affecting with your team actions. So yeah, if you have to choose only 3 things, make sure you do the measurements right and redo the measurements and dig deep. Make sure you do your team bubble level, and make sure that you redefine engagement and pop open all of these topics and redesign around them, really. So good luck doing this manually, as we say. If not, come talk to us, or even buy from one of our competitors, just if you find one that does exactly what we do. The idea is do something about it. There's loads that can be done. We'd love to help if we can, either, again, with the software or with advice. But yeah, talk to us and start working on it, because the sooner we do, the closer we are to high performance. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.